The Commissioners are conducting concurrent hearings today. Obviously, I will conduct this morning's hearing. The other Commissioners will refer to the transcript and recording of this hearing and may have follow-up questions in due course. Now, we sit today to hear the evidence of Trevor Fisher. Mr. Fisher, could you please come forward? Mr. Fisher, are you represented today?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Sadler's representing you. Oh, good. That's a positive. Mr. Fisher, would you like to take the oath or the affirmation?
Affirmation, please.
Right, thank you. Please state your name out aloud.
My name is Trevor James Fisher.
Thank you. And please read out aloud the affirmation.
I, Trevor James Fisher, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Please take your seat. I think you know the procedure from last time. It will follow much the same. Mr. Sadler will first ask you some questions about your second witness statement. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Sadler.
Commissioner. Mr. Fisher, were you summoned to appear before the Perth Casino Royal Commission today?
Yes.
And the Commission has provided you with a list of topics which will be covered during your examination?
Yes.
And the Commission invited you to prepare a written statement in relation to those topics?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of the second statement which you prepared?
Yes, I do.
And just for the Commission's benefit, what date did you sign that document? It's on the last page.
29th of August, 21.
And have you read the contents of that statement?
Yes, I certainly have.
And the contents of that statement are true and correct to the best of your knowledge? And
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Commissioner, I tender the second witness statement of Trevor Fisher, dated 29 August 2021, with the number GWC 0003.00117.00011.
The second witness statement of Mr. Fisher will be an exhibit with that number. Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Yes, Ms. Campbell.
Mr. Fisher, I'm going to be asking you some questions today in relation to specific topics.
Yes.
And I'll let you know as we go when we move from one topic to the next.
Thank you.
So the first topic I'd like to ask you some questions about is the processes at a GWC meeting. Is it right that you attended GWC meetings most months between April 2012 and December 2017?
Yes.
And who prepares the agenda packs for a GWC meeting?
The department.
And does the GWC ever have any input into the preparation of those agenda packs?
Only something that's been carried forward from a meeting before.
And what types of things might the GWC have input on?
No, I can't recall anything in particular.
So it's only in the previous month's meeting that the GWC might inform the department that they would have input into a specific agenda item for the following month?
No, not necessarily. It could be something that they need to do a little bit of homework on it and then bring it to a meeting a little bit further down the track.
Okay. And do any communications happen between the GWC and the department between meetings?
Not that I know of.
And you said that the GWC might ask the department to do some homework prior to meeting in the future. Is it possible for the GWC to ask the department to gather certain information to include in the agenda pack for a meeting?
Just rephrase that again, please.
So is it possible for the GWC to request that the department gathers certain information to include in the agenda pack for a meeting?
Yeah.
And you review those agenda packs before each meeting?
Yes.
Yep. So generally speaking, if a document is included in agenda pack, you will have read it before the meeting.
Yes.
And then at the meetings, if a GWC member asks a question, is that question recorded in the minutes for the meeting?
No, I don't think so.
And that's the same.
Unless it was requested to be put into the minutes.
Understand. And is that the same for a response in relation to a question?
Yes.
Yes. And the same for a discussion around an agenda item generally?
Yes.
How about objections? Are objections to a resolution always noted in the minutes?
No, I don't. No, I can't answer that.
Okay. And at the meetings, could you explain for us the process of the GWC approving or rejecting something? So is there some kind of vote of the members or?
Yes, there's a vote.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. The next topic I'd like to ask you about is junket regulation. And the evidence you gave last time you appeared before the Commission, you said that you were aware of junket operators in general, is that right?
Yes.
And your understanding was that they brought in high rollers to Perth Casino, is that right?
Mm.
And you are not aware of any processes or procedures in place in respect of junkets at Perth Casino?
No.
And is it correct that as far as you are aware, Perth Casino did not report to the GWC about junket operations?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you said in your evidence that you were aware of a document called the Casino Operations Manual for Perth Casino, is that right?
I was aware of it, yes.
And what is your understanding of the purpose of that document?
No, I can't really recall that.
Is it the case that it generally sets out procedures and processes for the operation of Perth Casino?
Yes, yeah.
Mr. Fisher, I'm going to ask you some questions about an amendment that was made to the Casino Operations Manual that removed a section that concerned junkets. And that amendment was some time ago, back in 2016. So I'm going to take you through a number of documents.
Yeah, I don't recall very much of this.
I'll take you through some documents to see if
Okay.
we can help refresh your memory. So can we please start with CRW.707.016.3823. So Mr. Fisher, this is the Perth Casino Operations Manual as at January 2016. And if we just go to page 54. So you can see at 16.2 subsection 1, that Perth Casino requires formal GWC clearance for approved junket operators. Do you recall any occasions where the GWC considered clearance of a junket operator at Perth Casino?
No, I can't.
And Mr. Fisher, you said in your evidence last time you appeared before the Commission that if Mr. Connolly wanted to make a change to the Casino Operations Manual, he would bring that change to the attention of the GWC at a monthly meeting. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And is it the case that the reason that change is brought to the GWC is so that the GWC can either approve or reject it?
Yes. Correct.
And what if Perth Casino wrote to Mr. Connolly and requested that an amendment be made to the Casino Operations Manual? Would you have expected that to be raised at a GWC meeting for the GWC's consideration?
Yes, it would have been. Mm.
Now I'll take you to another document now, Mr. Fisher. Can I please call up CRW.708.008.7829? And Mr. Fisher, this is a letter from March 2017 sent from Mr. Hume at Perth Casino to Mr. Connolly about a proposed amendment to the Casino Operations Manual. And if we go to page 4 of that letter, you can see the proposed amendment to the Operations Manual marked in track changes. And at the bottom of that page, you can see that Perth Casino proposed removing section 16, the Junket program section. And Mr. Fisher, if we now go to your witness statement, and can we please have pages 5 and 6 side by side? You say at the bottom of page 5, top of page 6, that in relation to the amendments to section 16 that we just saw in markup, you remember those being discussed?
No, I'll stick by my statement.
Yeah. So you do remember the amendments being discussed?
No, I can't say I can. No.
So
Not now, anyway.
that statement in your statement at paragraph 20, you no longer remember those amendments being discussed.
So when's this one done?
So if we go back to the amendments to the casino manual in
The
track changes.
statement in front of me is a statement from the first hearing, or
No, so this is your current statement,
Yeah,
Mr.
okay.
Fisher.
Mm.
I'll just take you back
Yeah, just
to
go back.
section 16. So it's section 16 at the bottom of the page, and you can see in track changes that it has been struck out,
yeah,
and you now have no memory of that amendment to the casino operations manual.
no.
Okay. I'll take you to another document, Mr. Fisher. Can I please call up GWC .0004, .0008, .0004? And this is a letter from March 2017 from Mr. Connolly, acting with his delegated authority as Chief Casino Officer, to Mr. Preston at Perth Casino. And in this letter, Mr. Fisher, Mr. Connolly approves the amendments to the Casino Operations Manual that we just saw in track changes. And then I'll take you to some GWC minutes where that amendment was considered. So,
So that was section 16, what we saw. Where is that referred to in that letter?
I understand that the track changed amendments, that where section 16 was struck out, was the changes Mr. Connolly attaches with this letter.
Right. So, but was that section 16 part of any of those other sections, or is it a separate section?
It's a separate section, and it didn't have any amendments made to it as such. It was just struck out. Perhaps if we go to the GWC meeting minutes where you can see the approval of the removal of that section. So if we go to GWC .002, .0016, .0222. So these are the minutes for the meeting on 23 May 2017. And if we go to page 93, so you can see on that page in the table setting out delegations, it says that the requirement for junket operators to be approved by GWC has been removed.
Sorry, where will we find that, Ms. Campbell?
That page. We just go to the next page,
Oh,
please.
is it?
Oh, it's
Well,
just
sorry. Yes, I
it's
can see
just
that
at
in
the
this.
bottom of. Where is she? Just at 11 of the 4th, 2017, at the bottom of that section of the table, and it says requirement for junket operators to be approved by GWC has been removed.
Yes. Thank you.
And Mr. Fisher, can you see that in the GWC
Yes, I
minutes?
can see that.
And do you recall any discussion around
No, I
this?
haven't got any
Okay.
recollection.
And Mr. Fisher, I showed you before the letter from Mr. Connolly to Mr. Preston dated in March 2017 where the amendments were approved. Having seen that letter, is it the case that Mr. Connolly only brought the amendments to section 16, removing that section, to the attention of the GWC after he had already approved it?
No, I don't think so.
So you recall that letter was dated in March 2017?
Oh,
And
no.
these GWC meeting minutes are dated in May 2017. Was this the first time that it came to the attention of the GWC that that section of the Casino Operations Manual was being removed in May 2017?
No, I don't have a recollection.
You don't recall?
No.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, I might move to a new topic now. We will stay with junkets, but I'll ask you some questions about AUSTRAC.
Yeah.
And when you gave evidence before the Commission previously, Mr. Sharp asked you some questions about money laundering. And you said that during your tenure, the Commission did not have any interaction with AUSTRAC that you are aware of.
That's right.
Is that a correct summary of your evidence?
Yes.
And is it the case that you would expect, if anyone on the GWC had been in contact with AUSTRAC about money laundering at the Perth Casino, that they would have informed other members of the Commission?
Yes.
And if we go back to your witness statement, current witness statement, at page 5, you say that you have no recollection of communications between Mr. Connolly and AUSTRAC between March 2017 and October 2017. Is that still the case? And so you do not recall whether Mr. Connolly told the GWC about his communications with AUSTRAC?
No, I don't have any recollection.
And you also don't have any recollection of the AUSTRAC information report on casino junkets? And Mr. Fisher, have you since had a chance to review that AUSTRAC report?
No, I haven't.
I'd just like to take you to one point that's made in that document. If I could please call up GWC.0004.0019.0012. So this is AUSTRAC's information report on casino junkets dated 14 July 2017. And seeing that document, Mr. Fisher, doesn't refresh your memory at
No,
all?
it doesn't. Certainly doesn't.
If we go to page 4 of that document, please. About halfway down that page, in the paragraph that starts at present, AUSTRAC reports that the only activity undertaken by all state regulators is the review and approval of casinos' junket operation procedures. Do you see that, Mr. Fisher?
Yes, I can see that.
And during your time on the Commission, what did the GWC do to review and approve Perth Casino's junket operation procedures?
No, I can't recall anything.
Okay. And now, with the benefit of hindsight and having some knowledge of AUSTRAC's inquiries, do you think it would have been better for the GWC to have had an active role in reviewing and approving Perth Casino's junket operation procedures?
Yes, I do. I think COVID's helped too.
What do you mean by that
Well,
COVID's helped?
It's kept a lot of them away.
Understand. Mr. Fisher, I'll take you to the next topic now. I'm going to ask you some questions about minimisation of harm.
Yes.
So if we go back to your witness statement at page 6, at paragraph 23, you say that you were concerned with problem gambling at the Perth casino because you have seen the damage it can do to people in your community.
Yes.
Could you explain what kind of harm you've witnessed in the community arising from problem gambling?
I haven't had a personal effect on any friends or family, but I've just seen what it can do to outside families in the way of broken homes and abuse and all that sort of down that line.
I understand. And what is your understanding of the term harm minimisation then?
Banks foreclosing, losing homes, broken homes, kids on the street. Yeah.
So would you say harm minimisation is avoiding those consequences?
Oh, I'd hope so. Yeah.
And am I right to assume that as a result of your community experience that you think harm minimisation for gambling is important?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's your understanding of the GWC's role in relation to minimising harm arising from gambling?
Keeping an eye on the actual structure of what the casino are doing to, I know they have an officer there doing that, and I think in one of my statements I mentioned that I went to a meeting at the casino about this subject, and there was a lot of people there. There was a guest speaker from the East Coast, and it was a very informative meeting. So it was, and GWC were invited to attend, and I was just one of the people that went. Yeah.
And was that Crown's responsible service of gambling
Yes.
meeting you're referring to?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher, are you aware that the GWC has harm minimisation duties under the GWC Act?
No, I haven't.
I might just take you to the Act now. If we could please call up GWC.001.0007.0200. And this is the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act 1987, Mr. Fisher. And if we could please just go to page 19. And at the bottom of that page, you see a section that sets out the duties of the Commission. And if we could just go to the next page and put those side by side, please. And Mr. Fisher, I'll draw your attention to subsection BA. And if we could just have the document displayer pop out that subsection, please. So it provides that it shall be the duty of the Commission to formulate and implement policies for the scrutiny, control and regulation of gaming and wagering, taking into account the requirements and interests of the community as a whole, and the need to minimise harm caused by gambling. Do you see that, Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yep. And do you recall ever seeing this section of the GWC Act before?
No, I don't, but I just elaborated it at the section before, I think, what I spoke to you about. So it's the same.
Yes, but at no point during when you started at the GWC or during your tenure, that section was brought to your attention?
No, not that I can recall.
But based on your answer before, were you generally aware that the GWC had a duty to take into account harm minimisation?
Yeah.
And then if we could please go to page 21 of that document. And section 8 at the bottom of the page sets out the powers of the Commission. And if we go to, again, the next page, side by side, please. And subsection DA. And document displayer, could you please just pop out subsection DA, which is at the bottom of page 14. Thank you. And that provides that the Commission may take steps to minimise harm to the community or any part of the community caused by gambling. And is it the same that you've not seen that section of the GWC Act before?
No.
But you were generally aware that the GWC had that power to take
Yes.
steps?
Yep.
Okay. And seeing these sections of the GWC Act now, Mr. Fisher, do you think it would have been better for those to have been brought to your attention when you started at the GWC?
Undoubtedly.
Mr. Fisher, were you aware of a subcommittee called the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee, or the PGSSC?
I was aware of it, but I don't know when it was started or implemented.
Do you have any idea about the type of work that the PGSSC does?
No, I think they liaised with Crown.
Okay. And do you recall if the PGSSC provided reports of its work to the GWC?
No, I can't recall anything.
Could you tell us from your perspective, beyond the meeting that you've already outlined that GWC members attended at Crown in relation to their responsible service of gaming program, what the GWC do in relation to minimisation of harm arising from gambling?
No, I can't really. We were aware of it. Obviously, on the GWC, we're aware of it. But what we did to facilitate or move on with it, I can't really answer that question.
Okay. Is it that you don't-
It just won't come to me.
You don't recall?
Yeah, I do recall something, but I can't. It won't come to me. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take you to a very specific example of when harm minimisation was considered at a GWC meeting. So if we could please call up GWC.0002, .0016, .0178_R. So these are the GWC meeting minutes for 26 April 2016 and agenda for the 24 May 2016 meeting. So if we go to page 3, document display of that page is just coming up blank for us. We're just rebooting the document display system.
And admiring the coat of arms in the meantime.
Okay, and Mr. Fisher, you can see you were present at this meeting.
Yes.
So if we could please go to page 154. So Mr Fisher, this is an agenda item that was prepared by Mr Beecroft that provides a report on a desktop assessment of gambling prevalence studies conducted in Australia. Do you recall reading Mr Beecroft's desktop assessment at this time?
No, I can't.
And if we go to page 155, just the next page, this is the first page of the study, and I'll just give you a few minutes to read through this page, Mr Fisher.
No, I don't recall. This is 5 years ago. I can't remember what I did yesterday.
But if you just have a read of that page now.
Yeah.
Can you see that the data that was being relied on by Mr Beecroft was the Productivity Commission report from 1999?
Yeah, I can see that.
And this is a meeting in May 2016. So is it correct to say that the data that was being relied on by Mr Beecroft at that point was around 17 years old?
Yes.
Do you think that it would have been better for the GWC to have relied on data that was more recent?
No. Hindsight's marvellous, isn't it?
It is.
Probably would have been, yeah.
And if we just go to page 156, the next page, I'll just let you read the conclusions. So there's just those 2 dot points at the top of the page under conclusion. And is it the case that Mr Beecroft concludes that it's reasonable to assume WA's level of problem gambling has remained the same because there has been no change to WA's access to gambling products?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Isn't it true that the number of EGMs in Perth Casino had increased from 200 machines in 1985 to 2,500 in 2012?
Yes.
So would you agree that increasing the number of EGMs in Perth Casino may mean that patrons have a greater access to gambling products in Western Australia?
Yes, but they have a more of a variety too to choose from. Just because there's more machines doesn't mean to say there's more gamblers.
Yes, but they do have greater
Yes,
access with
I
more
agree with that.
machines.
Yes.
And you don't recall if Mr Beecroft took the GWC through this study at the meeting, do you?
No, I don't.
Mr Fisher, we might go back to your statement at page 6, please. And at paragraph 24, you say that you are not aware of any research being conducted into the harm caused by gaming at Perth Casino.
Yes.
So, as far as you're aware, the GWC has never commissioned or conducted any studies or reports on the harm caused by casino gaming at Perth Casino. Yep. And as far as you're aware, Perth Casino has also never commissioned or conducted and presented to the GWC any studies or reports on the harm caused by gaming at Perth Casino.
But obviously I was wrong because there's something there.
Do you recall the GWC ever reviewing any literature about potential harms caused by casino gaming?
No.
with the benefit of this discussion and the documents that I've shown you today, do you think it would have been better for the GWC to have commissioned its own studies on harm caused by gaming at Perth Casino?
Yes, probably.
And Mr. Fisher, you mentioned before Crown's Responsible Service of Gaming program. So I'd just like to ask you some questions about that. And we're still on your statement, so at paragraph 26, please.
Yeah.
You say you recall the Responsible
Yeah.
Service of Gaming program. And at 27, you go on to say that you remember meeting with the head of Crown's Responsible Service of Gambling Division from time to time, who would present to the GWC on certain matters.
Yes.
Yep. Do you recall the name of the person who was head of Crown's Responsible Service of Gaming Division?
No.
And when you say that they presented to the GWC, would that have been at a GWC meeting?
Yes.
And this might be a hard one on the memory, Mr. Fisher, but do you recall examples of the topics
No.
that they might have discussed?
No, I can't.
If they did present to the GWC at a GWC meeting, would that have been recorded in the agenda items and minutes for that meeting?
I would have thought so.
And as far as you're aware, did the GWC ever ask Perth Casino for specific information about its Responsible Service of Gambling program?
No, but there was a monthly report of, I don't know if this is what you're leading into, but of people that were evicted and all those sort of things. There was a monthly report every month, yeah.
And was that something that was considered in the GWC meetings?
Yeah, it was always in the minutes, and it didn't used to vary very much, the numbers of people that were, but this is not only the gambling side of this, was the alcohol side of it as well,
So
that were evicted, and the number didn't usually vary. You know, I can't even remember how many it was. I think it was, don't hold me to this, but I think it was around about 100, give or take 20 or 30.
okay. And are you referring to people that were evicted from the premise of Crown? And that's different to patrons who had self-excluded themselves from gambling?
Yes, that's different.
Yes. So the statistics you're referring to that were reported to the GWC were for people who had been removed from the premise?
Yes.
Okay. And were you aware of any statistics about the success of Crown Perth's Responsible Service of Gambling program?
No, I wasn't. No.
Do you recall if the GWC ever asked Perth Casino for those kinds of
recall that.
statistics? Do you think, Mr. Fisher, with hindsight, that it was important for the GWC to understand how successful Perth Casino's Responsible Service of Gambling program actually was?
Yes.
And having regard to the GWC's duties and powers under the Act that we've just reviewed, do you think it would have been better if the GWC had done more to minimise the harm caused by gambling to patrons in Western Australia?
You're coming across to me like to say that gambling is a huge, huge, huge problem. I don't know if it is a huge, huge, huge problem. And in answer to your question, I think you're coming across too heavy.
Okay, so you think that do you think that the GWC did enough?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say that you don't consider gambling to be a huge, huge problem, could you elaborate on that for me, please?
Oh. We've just seen a scale there that was, 0.17 or something. We've only got machines just out here at the Burswood. They're not scattered all over the country like the East Coast. So, yeah.
So is that 2 points then, Mr. Fisher? You think that one of the reasons it isn't such a huge problem is because gambling is confined to Perth Casino in relation to the EGMs?
Yep.
And is the other reason that you were referring to the fact that you think that there is not a high prevalence of problem gambling in Western Australia based on the 1999 Productivity Commission report?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, I'll take you to another topic now. And I'd like to ask you some questions about advertising. Were you aware that there is a restriction in the GWC regulations that, with some limited exceptions, prohibits gambling operators from advertising?
You mean media advertising?
Yes, communications with the community.
Gambling, not to do with the casino, or just gambling in general?
So it prohibits gambling operators, so for example a casino, from advertising gambling.
TAB on that or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Any gambling operator.
Yeah, okay. This might not answer your question, but I brought it up once when I saw a lot of the American people advertising gambling here. I brought it up at the casino, and we as a GWC didn't have the power to stop the gambling, stop the advertising here, because it was administered from federal government side.
Okay.
Does that? It's probably nothing to do with your question, is it?
That's okay, Mr. Fisher. I'll ask you a question about that
Yeah.
anyway. Was that the advertising that you're talking about? Was that in relation to internet casinos, online casinos?
Yeah, those sort of. No, it's more of a lottery and more of a down that line.
I understand.
And also the betting side of it that you see on TV now, that's all off the East Coast, on like football betting and all that. I was dead against all that.
Okay. And why do you think that these restrictions that prohibit advertising for casino operators exist? And it might be a similar reason to what you've just explained in relation to your reaction to those American adverts.
Why do I think?
Yeah, why do you think that there is a prohibition?
Oh, I think it just... Kids can get addicted to it.
Mm-hmm. So,
Put it on at midnight, but not on at midday.
right. So would I be right in summarising that you think that it might have been to help protect patrons from gambling-related harms?
Yes, it would have been. Hadn't it been there?
And we understand that Perth Casino sent correspondence to its customers via emails and letters. Have you ever seen any of that correspondence?
Wasn't aware.
Okay. Well, I'll show you an example now. If we could please call up CRW.700.070.1579. So this is one of the communications sent from Perth Casino to its patrons. It's an example, so you can see that there's some placeholders where names would go. And I'll just give you a moment to have a read of that document, Mr. Fisher. And if you had seen that document and it had been, say, given to you during a GWC meeting, do you think that you would have thought it looks like an advertisement?
No, because it's going out to members. It's not going out to the broad public. If it had been going out into, if that had been advertised in the West Australian, I would have, probably said something.
So is
If you're
your
a member of something and you get information, that's how you choose.
so is your understanding of an advertisement that it could only be made to the public at large, not to a specific member group? So you can't advertise to members.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
You can.
yeah, you can advertise to members. Yeah,
Would this be an example of an advertisement that's just directed to members?
yes.
And this particular example, Mr. Fisher, can you see that it's offering complimentary gaming chips? And do you think that this kind of communication that is offering, for example, free gaming chips to patrons is the type of communication that promotes gambling?
No. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's any different to McDonald's advertising of free chips for when you buy one burger or something like that. That's the way I look at it, down that line. Same sort of principle.
But if we take your McDonald's example and they're offering a free chips, do you think that that would encourage people to go to McDonald's to get the free chips?
Yeah, I don't know. They're not members, are they?
No.
Could do. Yeah.
So you think it's possible that an advertisement like this one, or a communication rather like this one, might encourage members to gamble at Perth Casino?
Well, it's a reward. I don't know what a membership costs, and I don't know what benefits they get from being a member. They might get a discount off meals as well. So there's an incentive to go there and have meals as well. You know, you might be able to take your family and get 30% off for a whole family. So there's a benefit there. So
Yeah.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
I understand your example, Mr. Fisher, but this particular example is specifically in relation to complimentary chips, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this specific example is encouraging members to go to Perth Casino to engage in gaming.
Yes, probably.
And we've just spoken a lot about members. Do you agree that, generally speaking, patrons who might be at the highest risk of gambling-related harm are likely to already be existing customers of Perth Casino?
Yeah, can you just rephrase that?
Of course. So would you agree that patrons who might be at the highest risk of harm, so you might call
Yes.
them problem gamblers,
Yes.
are likely to already be existing customers of the Perth
Oh,
Casino?
yeah, I'd say so.
And possibly also members of the
Yes.
casino's loyalty program.
I'd say so.
And with that context, do you think that if communications were sent specifically to Perth Casino's loyalty program, so its members, that they would be being sent to a population group that has a higher risk of gambling-related harm than if they were just sent to the population at large?
Yes, probably.
And with the benefit of this discussion, Mr. Fisher, during your tenure on the GWC, do you think it would have concerned you knowing that communications similar to the example I've shown you were being sent by Perth Casino to its members?
Yeah, I don't think. Where would the GWC have the power to stop them from sending out promotional brochures or memberships? Do you know? I don't
Mr.
know if
Fisher,
we
I
did.
think that's a different question. You're just simply being asked at the moment is, do you think it was a matter that would have concerned the GWC?
No, I don't think so.
So you don't think that you, sitting in your tenure as a GWC member, would have been concerned that advertisements like this one, offering complimentary gambling chips to Perth Casino's loyalty members, like we've just spoken about, are at the highest risk of harm, which you agreed with?
I don't think he agreed it was the highest risk of harm.
I'll rephrase, at a higher risk of harm than the general population, that would have concerned you.
Oh. No, probably not. But no, I'm sort of on a seesaw here. I don't know which way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a concern, but there's not really. It's not a huge concern if that's what you mean.
Okay. And why don't you think it is a huge concern?
Because it's going to members. And I don't know how big their membership was or is or was at the time here. Was it August 14? Whether it's going to that many members that are the problem gamblers.
But in general, you agreed that patrons who were members of Crown Perth's loyalty program would be at a higher risk of harm than the general population.
Yes, probably. Yeah.
So do you still think that because this communication was only sent to members, that that's a reason for it not being concerning? Or do you think that that is a reason for concern?
No, I don't think it's a reason for concern.
Okay. And Mr. Fisher, you asked before, what would the GWC have been able to do? Is that correct summary of your question to me before?
To do with this?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what we could have done. We could have stopped them from advertising, but you know, they're a private company.
Do you think that it would have been appropriate for the GWC to have issued directions to regulate the type of communication that Perth Casino is sending to its customers?
Yes, in hindsight, yes, probably, because we had the power to work out what gaming machine went, so it's probably the same, on the same vein.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I'll move on to a new topic, Mr. Fisher. I'd like to ask you about electronic gaming machines. So I'm going to refer to those machines as EGMs when I ask you questions. So if we could go back to your witness statement at page 8. You say at paragraph 32 that you confirm that you understand that Perth Casino cannot have games played with poker machines.
That's right.
And you say that that is a matter of public policy, is that right?
Yes.
Could you please explain your understanding of the public policy reason that poker machines are banned in Western Australia?
Here's my statement there.
But can you elaborate on when you say it's a matter of public policy? What do you mean?
We had a policy of the no pokie machines, and a policy set out the criteria that had to be assessed.
I think what you're being asked is, what do you understand is the reason for the policy?
No, I can't.
You don't
No.
recall anything? Okay. And you say in the same paragraph of your statement that you can't recall the difference between an EGM and poker machine, but the GWC did have a policy setting out the criteria to be assessed?
I know poker machines were on the East Coast, but not here. Yeah, but I don't know the policy.
Mr. Fisher, I might just take you to a document which I think is a policy you might be referring to in your statement. So that's DLG.8001.001.5349. Is this the policy that you were referring to in your statement, Mr. Fisher?
No, I can't recall it.
You don't ever remember seeing this document?
No.
Were you familiar with the WA appendix to the gaming machine national standards?
No.
You don't ever recall hearing that?
No,
Before?
not that.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions, Mr. Fisher, about the approval process for an EGM game. So if we go back to Mr. Fisher's statement at page 8, paragraph 30, you say that new or amended games had to be approved by the GWC. And I just want to clarify, Mr. Fisher, that when you say amended games, are you talking about a game that is a variant or derivative of a game that has already been approved by the GWC?
The amended game would have been. The new game would have been one that was displayed in front of us, either on a screen or the machine came in.
So is it the case that if Perth Casino wanted to provide a new type of game being played on an EGM to its patrons, it must first get GWC's approval?
Yes.
And is that so GWC can make sure that that game complies with the EGM policy and national standards?
Yes.
And you describe broadly that approval process for EGM games at paragraph 30 of your statement. And it seems to me you describe it as a 4-step process. First, Perth Casino submits an application.
Yes.
Second, Perth Casino presents the game to the GWC. Third, the GWC asks questions of the presenter.
Yeah, if they wanted them.
And fourth, the GWC either approve or reject the game.
Yes.
Is that an accurate summary of your understanding?
Yes, certainly is.
And when you say that Perth Casino submits an application, what information does that application contain?
They'll go through and show you the whole workings of the machine and roll it and show the odds and the pitches and all those sort of things that went with that machine.
So is that in the application, Mr. Fisher, or the presentation? Or do you think of them as the same thing?
Yeah, they're both the same thing.
Okay. So both the application and the presentation, is it that they show you photos or do they show you a video?
Showed you video of each individual application. And they used to go for, I'm guessing here, probably 2 or 3 minutes each. Might even be a bit longer.
And what do they show you on that video?
Just how it would work if Mrs. Brown went and put the money in and rolled it, and how it would work.
Okay. And do you hear sound on those videos or are they silent? You hear the sounds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, a very loud sound.
And you said if the GWC have any questions, they'll ask the presenter. Is that right?
Yes, you could ask straight away.
And are those questions and the answers to those questions recorded anywhere, perhaps in meeting minutes?
No, I don't recall they were.
Okay. And Mr. Fisher, I understand that there was a change in the approval process for EGM games in 2016. And I might just take you to a document that summarises the process in 2016. Can we please call up DLG 0.8001.0025.8097? So this is a document that's summarising the approval process for EGMs at Perth Casino, and it is dated in May 2016. If we just go to page 5 of that document, and if we could just zoom in on that chart, please, document displayer. Thank you. So, Mr. Fisher, this chart represented what this document says is the EGM approval process at May 2016, and I'll just give you a moment to have a read of that chart. And is it the case that the process described in this chart is a slightly different process from the one you described in your witness statement?
I think when it went from game presentation to GWC, then it went to not approved in principle. I think that was the end of it then.
Yes.
Approved in principle and going down. I didn't realise that it went down so many steps.
Yeah. Was it your understanding that the GWC had final approval?
Yes?
And is it your understanding now seeing this document that the GWC, as at 2016, only had in principle approval?
No.
You don't? From just looking at this document though, Mr. Fisher, is that what it says to you? Do you agree that it says that the GWC only has approval in principle?
I thought when we approved it, it was approved game straight through to the bottom.
So you don't recall the department and the chief casino officer having any role in approval of EGM games?
No.
Okay. If we take this approval process that's set out in this chart as fact, would I be correct to say that in 2016, the approval process as you understood it, where the GWC had final approval, changed to transfer the control from the GWC to the department and chief casino officer?
No.
And
I don't recall any of that sort of. No, I'm not with your question.
okay, I'll repeat it for you, Mr. Fisher. So if we just say that the chart represents an accurate process for what was happening in relation to EGM approval in 2016, accepting that you don't have any memory of it, that the control for final approval of an EGM game had changed from being with the GWC to being with the department and chief casino officer.
Well, why would the chief casino officer actually, his department submit something to the GWC to be approved and then has to go under delegation from him again down below? Don't know.
Does this process not make much sense to you,
No,
Mr.
it doesn't make
Fisher?
any sense. Lost.
Looking at this process though, Mr. Fisher, you said to me before that it was for the GWC to consider whether the game complied with the EGM policy and the national standard. if the GWC only has in principle approval and only sees a presentation of the game but doesn't get the application that it goes to the department, is it the case that the GWC wouldn't be able to assess compliance with the EGM policy because it wouldn't have enough information?
True. When the delegation came from Crown to present in principle the machine, I understood that they had the approval from, I can't think of the name of the people that govern. Who's the people that govern machines Australia-wide? There's a...
Are you referring to the accredited testing facility
yes.
report?
I thought they would have submitted something to them before they came to us to see that the approval was going to be given to them to put the machine in Crown Perth.
As I understand it, Mr. Fisher, that accredited testing facility report that you're referring to certifies compliance with the national standard.
That's right.
And that report was only given to the department as part of the submission, the full submission. You see it's step 2 of the approval process, and not given to the GWC for its in principle approval.
Okay.
Do you have any recollection of that?
No, I don't.
Do you have any recollection of seeing the accredited testing facility reports after 2016?
No, I don't. No.
And with the benefit of this discussion, Mr. Fisher, and appreciating that you weren't aware of this more complicated EGM approval process, do you think it would have been appropriate for the process to allow the GWC to receive enough information, including the accredited testing facility report, to be able to certify compliance with its own EGM policy?
Yes.
Commissioner, I'm about to move on to another topic, and I thought it might be a good time to take a break.
Mr. Fisher, we'll have morning tea. We will resume again in 15 minutes, so that takes us up to, say, 25 minutes past 11. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
All rise. Thank you. Please be seated. Yes, Ms Campbell.
Mr Fisher, we've just discussed the approval process for EGMs, and I'd like to take you to an example of an approval of a new EGM game. Could I please call up GWC.0002.0016.0125? And this is the GWC meeting from 25 February 2014. And Mr Fisher, can you see on that page you were present at that meeting?
Yes.
And can we please go to page 2 of that document? And Mr Fisher, I'll just draw your attention to item 5.4, EGM presentations. You can see there that there was a game presentation on the game of the Flintstones Cape Fortune. And I'll just give you a moment to read through 5.4.
Yes.
And you can see that the members expressed concerns about the delivery mechanism
Yes.
of the symbols in the Flintstones game. Do you recall from this meeting what it was about that delivery mechanism that was concerning?
I think it was the time of the rolling, I think.
And when you say time, do you mean that
The
it was-
seconds.
but too quick?
Yeah,
or-
too quick.
Okay. And was it the case that the members considered whether that delivery mechanism of the symbols looked like a spinning reel?
I can recall something with the symbols, but I can't specifically recall what it was.
And as a result of that concern, you can see that the members requested a real-time demonstration of all variations of the Flintstones game that had already been approved by the Commission.
Yes.
And do you know why the GWC made that request?
No, I can't recall why.
I'll take you to another document, Mr Fisher, which is also minutes from a GWC meeting. Can I please call up GWC.0002.0016.0129? So this is just the GWC meetings from the next month. And you can see, Mr Fisher, that you were present at this meeting as well.
Yes.
Can we please go to page 2 of that document? Mr Fisher, do you recall a presentation made by Mr Connolly that had a video of a spinning reel poker machine followed by a video of an EGM that used the delivery mechanism of balls dropping into tubes?
No, I can't recall it.
You don't recall that presentation?
No, I don't.
Do you remember seeing a video of an EGM game where there was the delivery mechanism of the balls dropping into the tubes?
No, I can't recall that.
So you don't recall ever seeing an
No,
EGM video
no, I don't.
of that
No,
nature?
Not dropping into a tube, no.
Okay. What about the balls just dropping from the top of the screen in general?
No, I can't remember anything to do with balls. All I can remember is rolling over and the pictures lining up or not lining up.
And the pictures or the symbols that you're referring
Symbols,
to,
yes.
do you recall whether they were in a round shape?
No, I thought they were always rectangular or square.
Okay. And can you see in this meeting at item 5.2, we'll just get the document displayer to please zoom in onto that item. And I'll just give you a moment to have a read of that item, Mr. Fisher.
Yep.
And at this meeting, the members requested that Mr. Connolly liaise with Perth Casino with a view of decreasing game speed by a further 20%.
No, I can't recall that.
Can you see that that is what is recorded in
Yeah, I
these
can
minutes?
see that there, yes.
And you don't recall the reason for that?
No, I don't, no.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, I'll move to our next EGM topic. And I'd like to ask you some questions about the GWC's approval of the number of EGMs in Perth Casino. So a lot of those submissions about increases in number of EGMs were made before your time on the commission,
Yes.
but there was one made in August 2012. And if we could please call up CRW.707.001.0968. So this is a letter from Mr. Preston to Mr. Sargent in August 2012. Have you seen this letter before?
No, no, I can't say I have.
And I'll just give you a moment to just read the first page of that letter, Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Now I'll just draw your attention to the second last paragraph, which provides that the government has agreed in principle to the introduction of more table games
Yes.
and EGMs at Perth Casino.
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher, with the benefit of hindsight and also our discussions about harm minimisation today, do you think that when approving an increase in the number of EGMs at Perth Casino, one of the things that the GWC should consider is the potential harm those machines might cause to patrons?
Well, it was the government had set it up to have the extra machines in the new casino. So I can't see where the GWC would have a say on whether there should be less or whether there should be more.
Isn't it the case, Mr.
It's a
Fisher?
government decision.
Isn't it the case that the GWC has final approval of all EGM increases in Perth Casino?
Yes, yeah, I'd say so.
And when they're considering whether or not to approve an increase in the number of EGM machines, one of the things that they should consider is the potential harm those machines might cause to the community.
Yes, probably, yeah.
And then if we just go to page 15 of that letter, please. on this page of the letter, Perth Casino addresses that, Mr. Fisher, and says that it does not expect to see a material increase in the incidence of problem gambling as a result of the proposal. And even if they were wrong on that, Crown's RSG practices would be effective in mitigating that risk. And you can see that at the third paragraph from the bottom. At this point in time, Mr. Fisher, so around August 2012, do you know if the GWC had any idea about the prevalence of problem gambling in Western Australia?
No, I can't.
And looking at this now, do you think it would have been beneficial for the GWC to have had reference to academic studies or literature about preventing harm when it considered a proposal for the increase of EGM machines at Perth Casino?
Yes, it probably would have been.
And having considered the GWC's duties in relation to the harm minimisation that we looked at in the GWC Act today, do you think, looking back now, that the GWC had a duty to consider the need to minimise harm when approving EGMs at Perth Casino?
Yes, probably.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We'll move on from EGMs now, and I'd like to ask you some questions about the adequacy of the department's briefing to the GWC.
Yes.
You told me earlier that the department prepares the agenda packs for the GWC meetings.
Yes, that's correct.
And if Crown is making a proposal to the GWC, does the department or the Chief Casino Officer make a recommendation about whether the GWC should approve or reject the proposal?
Mike Connolly would have made a recommendation.
Yep. And I'm just going to take you to an example of one of those recommendations, Mr. Fisher. And that example is specific to EGM speed of play issue in 2014. And I'll just take you through some relevant documents in relation to that example. So if we could please call up DLG.0004.0001.0236. And this is the department's operation division meeting minutes from 27 March 2014. And I understand you probably won't have seen these minutes before. If we could just put pages 2 and 3 side by side, please. And Mr. Fisher, I'll just direct your attention to paragraph 4.1 in the second paragraph of that item, which is at the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3.
Yes.
You'll see that Mr. Connolly informs the department that the GWC would like to consider whether the minimum speed of play should be increased from 5 seconds to 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Connolly advised that he would liaise with Crown. I'll take you to another document now, Mr. Fisher, DLG.8001.002.7525. And this document is an email chain between Mr. Preston and Mr. Connolly. And if we just go to page 2 of that document, please. You'll see that Mr. Preston provides Mr. Connolly with some dot points about Crown's position on the proposed increase to the minimum speed of play. I'll just give you a minute to read through those 5 dot points. 6 rather. And then if we just go back to page 1, you'll be able to see Mr. Connolly's response to Mr. Preston. You just zoom in on that response, please, document displayer. It starts with yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Have you had a chance to read that, Mr. Fisher?
Yes, yeah.
And then on 24 June, Mr. Connolly then reported to the GWC, and I'll just bring up those minutes for you. So that's DLG.0002.0002.0052.
Yes.
And then if we could just go to pages 19 and 20 side by side, please. And then I'll just direct your attention, Mr. Fisher, to item 4.1.
Yep.
And document displayer, if you could also include the paragraph, just point I. Thank you. Okay. And you can see that Mr. Connolly outlines a number of adverse consequences of the proposed increase to minimum speed of play, and then recommends no further action by the GWC, so no change to the speed.
That's right.
And after looking at the chain of documents I've taken you to, Mr. Fisher, do you think it's possible that Mr. Preston and Mr. Hume influenced Mr. Connolly's recommendation to the GWC about increasing the minimum speed?
Can I point out that Mr. Fisher doesn't remember the 25 March agenda item on this. He wasn't at the department meeting. He wasn't a party to the email between those two people. He hasn't been asked if he remembers this particular meeting yet. So I'm not quite sure what he can really contribute towards this.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. I think the witness has, in any event, has answered no, so I think you can move on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Fisher, I'll move on to our next topic, which is I'd like to ask you some questions about conflicts of interest. And we can bring down that document now, please, document displayer. The first thing I'd like to ask you about, Mr. Fisher, is the trip to Macau that Mr. Sargent, Mr. Felsteed and Mr. Preston went on together in 2013. Do you recall the trip that I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember when you first found out about that trip?
No, it would have been after. It would have been at a meeting when Mr. Sargent declared it.
Yep, at a GWC meeting.
Yes.
And I'll just take you to some minutes of a meeting, Mr. Fisher. So can we please call up DLG.0002.0002.0052? Just the first page of that document, please. Thank you. So, Mr. Fisher, you can see you were present at this meeting.
Correct.
And then if we could please go to page 27. And I'll just direct your attention to item 10.4, Mr. Fisher. Just give you a second to have a read of that item.
Yes.
And is this when you recall becoming aware of the Macau trip at this meeting?
Yes, it would have been.
Yep.
Or would it have been the earlier meeting? Because it says that,
Well, he declared it here, didn't he?
yes, but that, it said there was a discussion of it in the August 2013 meeting. You see last paragraph?
Yeah,
Do you recall the discussion in
Yes.
August 2013?
yes, I do.
Okay. And Mr. Fisher, looking back now, do you think it was appropriate that Crown paid for Mr. Sargent's trip to Macau?
Oh, well, they wanted him to see how things operated over there, so I thought, yes, why not? I had nothing against it.
But in hindsight, do you think it would be better for perhaps the GWC members not to accept any kind of trips that are paid for by Crown?
No, because you've got to experience things to bring experience back to GWC. So if they want people to understand how things are working, why should the GWC pay for it? So I've got nothing against Crown paying for that, no.
And you have no concerns about any perceived conflict of interest that might arise?
No,
from
I don't
Crown?
think it was a conflict of interest. Barry was not that sort of person.
But not even a perception of a conflict of interest
No,
from an outsider?
No, he was not that way.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, the other thing I'd like to ask you about, some questions about, is the relationships between department employees and Crown employees. And if we go to your statement now, at page 10, please.
Yep.
And then if we just zoom in a little bit, please, document displayer. Thank you. You say that whilst you were on the GWC, you were aware of Mr. Connolly's fishing trips, but did not know that they were with Crown employees.
That's correct.
And after leaving the GWC, you've subsequently become aware that those fishing trips were with Crown employees?
Yes, only just in the last few months.
So as far as you are aware, whilst you were on the GWC, Mr. Connolly never disclosed his personal friendships with Crown employees. Do you think it's possible that there could have been a perceived conflict of interest arising from Mr. Connolly's friendships with Crown employees?
No, I don't think so.
Not even a perception from an outside perspective?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But looking back in hindsight, Mr. Fisher, do you think it would have been better for Mr. Connolly to have disclosed those friendships to the GWC?
Sorry, Commissioner, I rise. Mr. Connolly did disclose them to the chairperson of the GWC. I'm not sure whether that fact is being put to the witness or not, but possibly a bit more specificity to the question.
Yes, thank you, Ms Campbell. Please take that on board.
Mr. Fisher, you don't recall Mr. Connolly ever disclosing to you when you were present at a GWC meeting the personal friendships he had with Crown employees?
No.
And do you think he should have disclosed at a GWC meeting to all members those personal friendships?
Where do you start and where do you stop disclosing friends?
Would you agree that you perhaps start if those friends are Crown employees?
Yes, probably.
Okay. And if Mr. Connolly had disclosed those friendships to you while you were on the GWC, do you think it would have impacted the reliance you placed on Mr. Connolly's advice, particularly in relation to Crown proposals?
No, I don't think it would have, because I knew the guys from Crown as well, and they came across as astute businessmen, and how do I describe it? Honest sort of people. So, if Mr. Connolly had been involved with them, I don't think I would have been really out of the box to jump up and down. No, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Commissioner, that concludes my questions for Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Does any council wish to cross-examine? Yes, Ms. Seward.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Fisher, my name is Seward and I appear for the department. Just wanted to ask you a few questions about what's arisen today. Now, you were asked some questions about harm minimisation, and you were showing some papers that had some research.
Yes.
If the witness could please be shown GWC.0002.0016.0178 at page 154. So to orientate you, this is the 16 May 2016 GWC meeting, and this was a paper Mr. Beecroft prepared.
Yes.
If I could just ask the operator please to roll to the next page. And this was the page that you were shown by Councillor Sisting about the research.
Yes, correct.
And I think you agreed, well, withdraw that. I think it was put to you that the research that this was based on was from 1999,
Yes.
and you agreed that it would have been better to have some more recent research. Is that
Yes.
correct? If I could just ask you to just look at the paragraph which is under the first table. There's table 1. There's the first paragraph, to the second paragraph under that. It commences with the 2010 Productivity Commission report. Could I just ask you to read that paragraph, please?
Yes.
So you can see from that paragraph that Mr. Beecroft actually had regard to a 2010 Productivity Commission report as well.
See that? Yes.
So would you accept that it's not as concerning, this paper, because he's not only relying on 1999 information?
Yeah, certainly agree.
Thank you. Now, you were asked some questions about advertising that's done by Crown. Is it fair to say that at the time you were on the commission, you yourself weren't familiar with what the legal rules were about what advertising is or isn't permitted?
Yes, that's correct.
And you still don't know what those rules require?
Still don't know, no.
So you're also not familiar with whether there are any exceptions or permitted advertising that is allowed to occur? And so when you were shown a picture of a letter that was sent by Crown, we don't need to bring it up on the screen, you don't know whether that was a lawful permitted advertising, do you?
No.
And would you agree that to the extent you may be concerned about advertising, one of the things you would need to know is whether that was lawfully permitted under the relevant regulations?
Yes, correct.
Now, you were also asked some questions about the approval process for EGMs. And we don't need to take you to the documents, but there was a flowchart that you were shown.
Yes.
Is it right to say that during your time on the commission, the process that was followed is that there was an initial presentation of a new proposed game by Crown to the commission members,
Yes.
and that the first stage was an in-principle approval for that
Yes.
game?
Yep.
And as part of considering giving that in-principle approval, is it fair to say that the commission members would assess the proposed game against the criteria in the relevant policy about EGMs?
Yes.
And against the relevant WA appendix, which set out the specific requirements?
Yes, that's right.
And the purpose of doing that was to determine whether it was not a poker machine. And is it fair that the reason why there was an in-principle approval at the beginning was because Crown needed to know whether it was likely the game would be approved before they spent the money building the game.
Yeah,
And is it correct to say that a condition of the in-principle approval was that once that game was built, it be returned for consideration as to whether it still met the criteria?
Sorry, return to whom?
Sorry, thank you. That there would be a consideration of whether that game met the criteria.
yes.
Whom?
Yes, and would that to be done by either the Commission or could it be done by the Chief Casino Officer acting under delegation?
No, I can't recall whether the Chief Casino Officer could have done it under delegation without the Commission's approval.
So you can't recall whether
No, I
that
can't
was
recall.
permitted or not?
No,
Okay, thank you. And was there also a requirement that the game once built be subject to the external testing?
yes,
And again, that external testing couldn't happen until the game was actually constructed.
that's right.
No further questions.
Thank you, Ms Seeley. Mr Malone?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Mr Fisher and Mr Malone up here for Mr Connolly. I've just got some questions in relation to delegations and the removal of junket provisions that you were shown earlier by counsel assisting. Do you remember that evidence?
Yes,
I've got two parts to ask you about, the amendment itself, but also the GWC's response to it. I'll ask you the general question first, and then we'll come to the specifics.
okay.
If the GWC was unhappy or disagreed with the way a delegate, any delegate, who held power pursuant to a instrument of delegation, if the GWC was unhappy with how that person had used that delegation, the GWC would have made that person aware. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
And the way the GWC would have made that person aware is in a GWC meeting.
Yes, definitely.
And you would expect that if they were to make a person aware of that, it would be noted, i.e. it would actually be minuted.
Yes, I would have thought so.
Turning to the junket provisions themselves, and I'll bring up a document for your benefit, CRW.708.008.7829. This is the first page of a letter that I believe you were shown earlier today, and if we scroll through to page 7, you'll see that this is the removal of section 16, which is titled Junket Program,
Yes,
and you asked questions about this provision being removed from the Casino Operation Manual. Do you remember those questions?
yes, I do.
Those questions, and the transcript may correct me, were in relation to the removal of junket provisions from the Casino Manual.
Removal, yes.
If we now move to page 23, this same document, you'll see that this is what's called attachment 2 to that letter, and this is, you'll note, because it's not struck out, it is the proposed new section to be put into the Casino Manual. And you'll see, if you just scroll down the page, there's no need to read it in any particular. I'll take you to the parts I want you to look at.
Okay.
But you'll see under legislation/requirements the word junkets there. Do you see that in about the middle of the page?
Yes,
Yes. And you see that there's a discussion then that flows on about junket activity, what a junket is, the definition is provided and the like. Do you see that there?
yes,
Yes. And if we now scroll through to, I believe, page 25, it's a blank page. Maybe we can try page 26 if it will assist. It should be borne out on all those pages. I can give a new reference if that may assist. CRW.708.008.7854. Yeah, I thought that might be the case because that happened on my one too. There we go. And if we can just go back one page, thank you, if that's possible. So you'll see there, this is the section contents, and what's set out there is new provisions in relation to premium gaming business, junket programs, junket and premium program procedures, referral agents, and foreign currency matters. Do you accept that this new section included new provisions in relation to junkets? So it wasn't the case that section 16 was being removed in its entirety.
No, that's right.
There was a new section coming in on different terms, admittedly, but there was a new section coming in.
Yes.
Yes. And so then, turning then to Mr. Connolly's use of delegated power in relation to this matter, if the GWC was unhappy with the way that Mr. Connolly used that delegation of power to approve the changes to the casino manual, you would have expected the GWC to make Mr. Connolly aware of that.
Oh, definitely.
And at that meeting in which the GWC was made aware, being the May 2017 meeting, and I can take you to it if you like, but do you have any recollection of anyone making Mr. Connolly aware that they were unhappy with the way that delegation had been used?
No, I can't recall that, no.
No. And do you accept that you cannot recall because it did not happen, or because you cannot recall that meeting?
No, I just cannot recall it.
Okay. I might just cover off on this point then. For your benefit, if we turn to GWC.0002.0016.0220_0004, you'll see, and we can go through it if you like, but you see there under 11.2 approvals under delegation.
Yes.
Now, unless I've made an error, I believe that's the minutes of that meeting. And you'll see there, resolved to note approvals issued under delegation. So do you accept that no one at that meeting made Mr. Connolly aware that they were unhappy with the way that delegation had been used?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. No further questions, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Anyone else? No? I've only got one area I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Fisher. That was in relation to the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee. Now, when you were a member of the GWC, did you understand that that committee was a subcommittee of the GWC, or did you think that it was created by some other body, or what?
I thought it was GWC department in that whole area was...
A combined...
Yes.
And so who did you think...
It was a separate identity.
A separate identity?
Yeah.
So did you think that it had responsibility for its own operation, or did you think that the department or the GWC or Crown, somebody else sort of oversaw it?
No, I thought they were just a standalone committee.
Were you aware when you were a member of the GWC that the GWC provided some funding to that committee?
Yes, I put that in my... I knew some funding was going there, but I couldn't say where it was coming from, whether it was out of the department's funding or whether it was out of the GWC funding. But I knew that they were getting funding to have for that committee.
Did you know how it was determined, the amount of funding that it received from either the department or the GWC?
No, I thought there was a levy, but I could be wrong.
Those were all the questions I wanted to ask,
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Fisher. Yes, Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I please have brought up the letter of 2 August 2012, which has the number CRW 707-001-0968. And just to orientate you, Mr. Fisher, this is the letter that Crown was written to you, or to Sergeant, sorry. You don't have any recollection of this letter, I believe. And it's the one with the bottom 2 paragraphs, I think, were brought to your attention, where it talked about the government has agreed in principle to an increase of EGMs at the casino. And you're asked some questions about this, particularly in relation to the Gaming Wagering Commission's considerations of responsible service of gambling and harm minimisation.
Yes.
Yes. Can we please have brought up GWC 0002 0016 0069. So this is the agenda for the meeting on the 28th of August 2012. Apologies, I don't have the minutes. I can find them, but I'm not sure if you're actually at this or not, but we'll work on the assumption that you were and check it afterwards. Can we go down to page 26? This is agenda item 5.2, where the increase in EGMs was considered by the Gaming Wagering Commission. I'd also like to draw your attention to a paragraph on the next page, please, at the top. This paragraph's to the effect that you are considering the prevalence of problem gambling and the report by the Productivity Commission. Would you like to make any more comments about the Gaming Wagering's Commission consideration of problem gambling in relation to the increase of EGMs at the casino in response to the building of Crown Towers? I believe you had a concern that you may not have considered problem gambling in relation to this proposal.
No, I didn't consider that. No, with the proposal, no, there wasn't.
And just to clarify that answer, do you think that the Gaming Wagering Commission did take into consideration problem gambling issues when making the recommendation?
Would have for sure. Yeah.
And that's recorded there in the agenda paper.
Yeah.
That's all the questions I had, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr Sattler. Mr Fisher, that concludes your evidence today. As the other commissioners are not present, after they review your evidence, they may have some questions for you. I imagine that if that occurs, that can be dealt with in writing. Nevertheless, I will leave the summons in place just in case we need to see you again, but I would very much doubt it.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your assistance today, and we will now adjourn until 2 p.m.
All rise.